There we go.
All right, we're live.
We're live.
Welcome, everybody. Hopefully, we got a few people here, but we want to introduce ourselves in Pantry Prep a little bit, let you know kind of why we're here, as well as answer questions that people have been dying to know down in the comments.
I'm Rick. This is Jake. We're brothers.
I've been our whole lives.
Yeah. About the same amount of time. I guess not my whole life.
My whole life, as long as I remember.
Yeah, that's right. But to kick this off, we want to give you a little bit of background of why we're doing what we're doing. And so I think you want to go ahead and start with that?
Yeah, let me read off something that I prepared. It starts with a poem.
Because we're that kind of preparedness people.
Yeah, we're into poetry. But this is a poem called The Bridge Builder by Will Trumgoole. An old man going the lone highway came at the evening cold and gray to a chasm vast and wide and deep, through which was flowing a sullen tide. The old man crossed in the twilight dim. The sullen stream had no fear for him, but he turned when safe on the other side and built the bridge to span the tide. Old man, said a fellow pilgrim near, you're wasting your time and your strength by building here. Your journey will end with the ending day, and never again will pass this way. You've crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build this bridge at evening tide? The builder lifted his old gray head. Good friend, in the path I have come, he said, there follows after me today a youth, whose feet must pass this way. This chasm that has been is not to me, to that fair-haired youth may a pitfall be. He too must cross in the twilight dim. Good friend, I'm building this bridge for him. So why do we make this channel? Though we may have many of the skills necessary to deal with the unknown of tomorrow, we see many that have no such skills and also don't see the threats over the horizon. Should we turn our backs on them and let them suffer, or worse, just because they didn't have the foresight that we were blessed with? Or should we offer wisdom to those that will listen and bless others with the talents we've been given? There are some of the comments that accuse us of chasing fame and fortune with the content we create. Though I wouldn't mind the security that would come from having a successful channel, it's not the reason behind our work. It's to help others catch up and become self-reliant themselves, because we love our neighbor and see the value in community. We don't want to be the only ones to make it across the river. It's important that we get as much of our community as we can across as well. This thought came to me when learning about my own family history. I first heard this poem at my grandfather's funeral because he literally was an engineer that built bridges all over Idaho. But going even further back, our relative Frederick Kessler, who Ricky's named after, built a ferry so that the pioneers could cross the Missouri River. He was put in charge of the construction of the ferry, and in a mere 16 days, the ferry was complete. We have a journal entry of his shortly after the project was completed where he states, I kept at work day and night, ferrying the host of Israel with their wagons and all their belongings to a place of safety. We ferried hundreds of wagons across, and at last I had to rest. I have become completely tired out. I had worked for weeks, day and night, without money and without price. Without money and without price are 5 words of his that mean the most to me. Without means, capital, or resources. He built a ferry large enough to move wagons, animals, and supplies across the Missouri River. Keep in mind, this isn't a small river, miles wide in most areas. And he built that large of a ferry that it was able to make hundreds of trips in that time period so that they can make it to winter quarters in time. The resourcefulness and drive it would take to accomplish such a task is staggering to consider. But then the second half, without price. He wasn't promised a fortune for accomplishing this task, just the opportunity to create a better life for his family and his community out west where we still live today, showing us that there are some things in life that are far more valuable than money. He then went on to build the first flour mill in Nebraska, a wheat and corn mill in Kansas, as well as a flour mill for the Potawatomi Indians, and a wood mill in Texas before finally making it to the Utah Valley. There, he was responsible for multiple flour and wood mills that were crucial to the expansion out west. Now, those seem like impossibly large shoes to fill, since there are now millions of people that have benefited from our ancestors' abilities. It's hard to imagine a way that we can make our lives as impactful on those around us as our ancestor did. But like the untapped frontier of the West, there's untapped frontier online, that we can spread our message, our skills, that could also potentially benefit millions. Like so many pioneers that made their way out west, without the necessary skills, they had someone like Frederick Kessler to lean on for help. Like him, we hope to be that support for others that have the bravery to become self-sufficient, but may not already have the knowledge or means. We hope to help as many as we can to acquire the skills and confidence to flourish when treading into the unknown.
So that's it. That's what we're about.
That's kind of what I came up with when trying to think of kind of the mission statement behind Pantry Prep. We want to pass on what we've learned from our parents, from our ancestors, to those that may not have learned these lessons at a young age, because we see in the future these skills being vital to, getting by, possibly even surviving. So being able to produce our own food, being able to save our own water, look forward to the future, and stay out of the way of future problems is something we want to help others to be able to do as well.
So we're here live today. The purpose of this is we want to be able to just talk with you, hang out with you, answer questions that you may have, anything preparedness related. We are not, I wouldn't say like world-class professional experts on every topic of preparedness. I don't think anybody can be on every topic.
No.
But we were raised in a family where preparedness, self-reliance, growing food, preserving food, outdoor skills, camping. We're both Eagle Scouts, all sorts of survival skills. And even today, our parents have mountain property and we're out there all the time doing everything. So a lot of homesteading related stuff, raising animals and livestock. We've had horses and you've done pigs. In our family, there's goats and sheep, and we got chickens and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So lots of things that we can share from our experience. So feel free to use the chat. Go ahead and type in any questions that you may have that you want to discuss or a topic of discussion, and we'll go at it. But to start off, we're going to go ahead and take questions that have come through videos on the through comments or questions on our videos on the channel. So we'll go ahead and start there, and then anyway, as you type in questions, we'll jump to those. But the first one here, this is the most recent question we got on most recent video. And so let's see, Deborah Lozano says, do you rotate bottled water you buy? So this is a video about water storage. Do you rotate through your bottled water? What do you?
Absolutely. So in my plan, I need 4 water cases to meet our initial needs, and then I have some water barrels. But those water bottles, we work through in a FIFO, first in, first out format. Not necessarily because that water goes bad quickly. The way that it's treated and bottled is supposed to be able to last a very, very long time. But I think it's a great practice that any of these resources that we're going to need in the long run, we should be running through so that the day that we need it, it's not already near or past its expiration date.
Right.
So even though water is one of the more stable resources that we keep preserved or keep, saved on hand, I think it's just good practice to be rotating through those.
And like for me as well, it's maybe more about the practice than anything else. In general, if there's a resource that I use in my everyday life, which most of our preparedness resources we probably should, whether that's like the tools and gear that we have, we should know how to use them. So we should use them. But also the food storage, especially, we shouldn't have stuff that we set aside only for, a long-term scenario. It's probably going to go bad before you use it, and then it'll be wasted. And in the cases of many people, I've seen this happen where they have years worth of food storage and then it's expired and they don't even realize it. So they think they're covered. If you use it and rotate through it, you're good. With bottled water, I do the same thing. It's just, I'll buy a new case and I'll take the extra minute to move the stack, put it on the bottom, put the stack on top. That's it. And then I'm still working my way down from the top. So bottled water, just like everything else, not because it's going to go bad, so per se, but
so we find it to just be a good practice. But then there's also scenarios like where we have our mountain property that in the case of, civil unrest, we could go out there for a period of time. Keeping a stash like that for a year, maybe even 2 years, that's fine. We're not going to work through that water nearly as quickly because we aren't up there a whole ton. That being said, every so often we will just take all the water that's kept up there in bottles down, and then we can run through it at our houses and bring up new cases. So even there where we're going first in, first out, but in a much slower pattern than we would at home.
Awesome. Hey, Mr. Cody, he says, could you go pirate style and store your water and use wooden barrels like from a winery? Any concerns with that? When does a winery get rid of their barrels? Like, do they just use them once? I don't know enough about them.
I don't know either. I know that it's quite the aging process,
Mhm.
and there's a bit of a reaction between the wood and
Right.
the berries. I would be afraid of contamination between what's left in the barrels from the berries, because all that sugar
Right.
is not going to store well.
The other thing is, like with wine, with the fermentation process and everything,
Mhm.
the alcohol is killing bacteria that could be growing. Like, I don't know. I would imagine that wooden barrels are probably not quite as, I mean, they're watertight at least, but
Yeah.
they might not be totally airtight. I don't know. I don't know enough about them, but it's an interesting thought. Like, if you've got a winery down the street that's selling used barrels and you want to use them to store stuff, give it a shot, but your water might taste weird. And
Yeah, we can't stand behind that recommendation, but if somebody knows more about that, that would be an interesting
yeah,
idea to chase.
yeah. And I mean, I know Cody. We work with Cody, so he's always one for creative ideas. Somebody asked, because we did water testing we did these filters,
Berkey's, Alexa Pures.
and they were asking what's the E. coli test that I did and where can they get it. I literally just bought it on Amazon. I tried to find one that looked as reputable as possible, and I'm just gonna find it real quick. But it came with the bottles of test strips, and so I think it was like Verify with an A. Yeah.
But the bacteria test was the expensive part.
Right. It
of the
came with
test.
one bottle per like tube with 100 test strips in
Yeah.
it. So I can test a ton for heavy metals and all sorts of stuff. But when it comes to the bacteria, the E. coli and other harmful bacteria, you get one shot. So I had to buy like 4 of those. Although it looks like there are other ones that I think they are all using the same stuff. Yeah, it's Verify, VARIFY, 17-in-1 complete drinking water test kit. In fact, I think I linked to it maybe in that video. But there's other places where you can buy like a 6-pack of just bacteria tests. Anyway, if you just want to test
36.
So yeah, about $6 a test.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right.
But that'll do a wide array, not just
yeah.
the
It's
E.
not just E.
coli.
coli. It's saying harmful bacteria. So obviously, it's not going to catch maybe any and all bacteria, but there's probably certain markers that they're looking for.
like salmonella.
Yeah.
There's some other ones that end up in
water,
natural waterways.
Right. And so they're looking for the common ones, but also maybe there may be some specific markers that are like bacteria tend to do this, and that's what changes the color. Anyway, it's some kind of natural process that's causing the color to change if there's bacteria. I was actually amazed and surprised to find that like this pond water, that literally like ducks swim in this pond. There's algae growing. It's just a neighborhood pond for fishing and stuff. It showed up no harmful bacteria. I'm like,
No way.
well, crap. Well, that doesn't really help me with this test. It's like, where can I go buy some E. coli to put in the water so I can see if the filters actually filter?
I'm glad they don't sell E. coli over the counter.
I could probably get a hold of it somewhere. Cody said, "Hey, Mr. Cody says, the water will taste weird in the wine barrels, but at least you'll look cool doing it.
You would look pretty cool doing it.
Yeah.
Might feel pretty cool with the residual alcohol that's left over from it.
Might make you feel real cool.
Yeah.
Someone asked about combining. So I did a video about emergency rations. I don't recommend trying to live on those for an extended period of time. But they said, could you combine those ration bars with, they said, survival tabs to try to get some of the more micronutrients, the vitamins and things that might be missing from just the ration bars that are more intended to give you enough protein, fiber, and carbs to get by.
Yeah.
Almost no fat. I mean, sure. But again, for me, what it came down to was after about 3 days, I preferred starvation to eating them. So I just wouldn't count on them for a long term. Like literally I got to where I was eating fewer than 1,000 calories a day because it just made me feel sick and they just tasted gross. It's like one of those things where it's like, you can stand to eat something you don't love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can eat it at a meal, but it's like, if that's all you get from now on, it doesn't take that long before you just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of them where the flavor, like they tried to flavor them, but it was just bad enough that even the thought of it is like making you want to gag. So, and I have a pretty strong stomach. Like I can eat whatever.
It's funny how that works. Like on the series alone, there was a guy that had tons of smoked fish and didn't want to eat it. He had a bunch in reserve and was like, look, I can keep going because I have it in store. But his body
part
fat
of his
percentage
problem
was
he was rationing it too.
Yeah.
He wanted to make it last a really long time. So he was actually starving himself.
I'm afraid he rationed it because he didn't want to eat it.
That's quite possible. That is like one of the biggest reasons I probably couldn't go on that show. I don't particularly like fish. I can eat fish for a meal, you know, it's a healthy thing. So I actually purposely in our family, we will make fish, even though it's none of our favorite. And my kids like it better than my wife and I. But like if that was the thought, like all I can eat is like fish. It's like starve or eat fish. I don't know. I'd almost go on there and be like, I'm just gonna see how long I can last. I'm just gonna drink water.
That reminds me of an experiment Jim did in high school with macaroni cheese, where he ate nothing but macaroni and cheese for a week and ended up losing, I think, like 10 pounds.
He couldn't stand it by the end.
So, not that macaroni and cheese is a great diet food.
No,
but making it so you can only eat one food will significantly decrease your appetite.
It's a great way if you're trying to lose weight. Force yourself to only eat one thing that you would like to remove from your diet. Eat too much of it, and then don't allow yourself to eat anything else for the rest of the week. And like you will train yourself to not need as much food.
Especially not that food. It'll probably be years
and you'll
before
particularly
you
hate that
one
food.
Thing.
Yep.
That's funny.
All right.
Diet plans. That's another thing we're offering here at Pantry Prep.
Not approved by any dietitian.
But also with those additional nutrient tablets, the bioavailability of many of these vitamins, supplements, is pretty limited. It's better than nothing. It's probably a good idea to have those with ration bars, but it's not something that I would recommend doing for the long run. For any period of time outside of necessity.
Natural foods.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that they're going to be able to offer the fats that your body's looking for.
That's another really interesting thing from just watching people on the show alone, because I think a lot of us feel more confident in our ability to just like go survive in nature.
Yeah.
But
what do I need to do? Just don't die.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's like, I've watched Bear Grylls. You can eat grubs and crap, but it's like, how many calories a day can you get from that? Can you sustain that? Can you do it for 3 days on a TV show? Sure. Especially because once the camera stops rolling, he and the crew sit down and eat a real meal. But could you sustain that and survive in that sort of situation and create a situation where you thrive, knowing that like to be able to plant anything and start, like we're talking about a full season, right? To be able to do that. And that's just, it's harder, I think, than most of us think. And so being able to find natural foods and stuff and being prepared with enough of it. If you're regularly growing a garden, no big deal. If I can't buy food for a little bit, I still have all the produce that I need, at least for certain times of the year. And then if you learn to preserve that food for the off season, right, most of the year, then you can still have those, even if you had to add some sugar to preserve it, right? You at least can still get those nutrients in a more natural way that your body can use.
Yeah, actually pull out. Also, what our palates are designed for these days, with how much salt and sugar and things like that we have in our diet. If you had to go out and live off of nothing but grubs, I imagine that your body would suffer a lot from that decrease in sodium, as well as all the other things your body runs off of. We're used to having a very full digestive system.
That's something my sister-in-law has as part of their plan. Very prepared for lots of things. And one of the first things is in their bigger pantry room, storeroom, is they have a section of stuff that's just like the stuff kids will eat. Sugary breakfast cereal, Oreos, like all those kinds of things. And it's like, it's to help transition from our current diet to the long-term diet. So it's like, if they had to live off of food storage for a year, there would be a month or two where they could have some of that, because it turns out that in those kind of situations where you're rationing, where people are having to eat that ration type food, the people that suffer the most and even die are usually children and elderly, mostly because they'll just stop eating. Wow. Like they'll end up really malnourished because they're used to being able to choose what to eat. Whereas most of the rest of us like are going to be more able to adapt, but children are just like, I don't understand it. Just give me something that tastes good.
Right.
And I know with my kids, it's like, if they don't like dinner, if I don't make them, they just won't eat it,
Right.
And it's like, you're just going to go to bed hungry. They're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Imagine that for every day.
Well, and not to mention just how important glucose is for brain function. It's the majority of what your brain runs off of. So in a stressful situation where you would need your food storage, I think that you'd want your brain to work just as well as your body. So even though your body might have the energy and might not be withering away because of a lack of food, if you don't have the glucose necessary for your brain to be able to think properly, how well are you going to be able to make rational decisions to keep your family out of danger? Are you going to maybe make a risky decision because you feel dire, because you aren't having these nutrients that your body's used to having? Potentially. So I think it's just wise to keep those things on hand, and they're pretty well preserved. Sugary treats, sugar's a great preservative.
It is.
So I found packets of fruit snacks that are sitting in my car a year or two later, and they're harder, but they last longer. It's like a Jolly Rancher.
Which, by the way, like Jolly Ranchers, that's something Mom used to always put in our 72-hour kits, because it's like, it's a sweet treat. It's quick, available glucose, and they last forever. They do get like kind of sticky over time, but that was like the only thing in my 72-hour kit that was still good. When I last opened it, opened it up. I'm like, oh, wow, it's been a long time.
That's awesome.
But the Jolly Ranchers, they're still fine. People have asked about with these filters, these gravity filters, if the filters are interchangeable. Could you put Berkey filters in a cheap, this is Pure Well brand from Amazon. It's way cheaper. Yeah. In fact, the Pure Well has the same spigot, like the metal one, as the Alexa Pure. And you have to pay extra for that if you want it from Berkey.
No kidding.
Like the Berkey's just a plastic one. I'm like, okay. Like there's almost no difference other than just like the stamping and stuff. It's stainless. It's the same thing. And then the holes are the same. I think though, this one might only have 2 holes in it
instead of 4.
But yeah, the others have 4. So you can have multiple filters, and the Pure Well is designed for only 2. So if you don't know how to use a drill, you're stuck with only 2.
So what do you think the recommendation is then? Go with the least expensive?
You might as well, unless like a lot of times you can get a bundle. Like when you buy the thing, they'll also be like, well, you can get that plus 4 filters, and it's way marked down. And then in the end, you could end up saving money over buying this with its filters that aren't as good, that you're like, well, I'll just throw those away. Like if you buy this, you're going to have to pay for the filter that comes with it as part of that cost. And if you're like, I don't know that I trust it because it clearly doesn't work quite as well. I don't know, maybe it works well enough. The things that we tested for, it got the things that mattered out of the water. It just didn't get as much out. Like when I put Kool-Aid through it, like the Berkey, I get water on the other side, basically, with maybe a little bit of sweetness to it. But with this, I get definite, like, it's barely filtered, it's very colored, and it's very sugary. So it's clearly not the pore size, and just the filtering capability of it isn't as good. So
for long-term emergency preparedness, having some extra filters sitting in the back, you can go ahead and use the Berkeys up front, but the day that they run out, it would still be good to have those other ones. So
that's a good point.
It's just additional longevity you get out of your filter.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question we get with these, somebody asked, can I use, this was from Hammerglock 42, can I use one of these filters for my well water that I don't treat? So if you're living off a well, will this get all the stuff out of it that, for example, up at the mountain property, we get a lot of iron and stuff. So the water comes out kind of red, right?
Yeah.
And so it pumps from the well into a kind of a storage tank, and then we turn off the well pump. And so it settles, and a lot of that sediment settles. And we do have an opening on the bottom with the valve, so we can clear that out every so often.
We'll flush it out every year or so.
But and then the water pumps into the house kind of off the top of that. So it's not as filled with sediment, but there's still sediment in it.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You could put it in one of these, let it drain through, and what's going to come out the other side is going to be basically really good, clean tasty well water.
Although letting it gravity filter beforehand is going to increase the longevity of your filters greatly, because
Right.
from our experience with our mountain property,
Right.
those iron particulates, the orange color in there, just clog that filter so quickly.
Right.
But if we let it sit for a couple of days,
you
the
let
water
that
comes
settle,
out clear, and then that clear water goes through that filter without clogging it up nearly as quick. So
you do the same thing for like rainwater capture and storage. Typically what you'll want to do is have, if it's coming down from your roof through like a gutter system and lands into a tank, you'll want it to kind of sit in that tank and then overflow into the next tank.
Yes.
So it's coming off the top, and that way most of the heavier stuff will fall to the bottom, and then every so often you just let that flush out a little bit to clear that. Otherwise you eventually end up with a barrel full of garbage. So yeah,
and there's steps to the filtering too, because in that rainwater collection system, you usually have some type of grate filter.
Yeah.
As it's coming down to catch the larger particulates.
Yep.
Same thing with these Berkeys. They recommend, running it through like a
cheesecloth
sheet
or
cheesecloth,
something
along those lines.
Right. I didn't for the video, and I got some comments like, they say to run it through a cheesecloth, you idiot. And it's like, I know, but I'm doing like a torture test.
Right.
It's
kind of the point.
I've done a lot of torture testing over the years. I started with my buddy Jim, the channel Backfired, and we do torture testing with guns and stuff. And it's like, yeah, you're not supposed to do this either.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm going to put it through the roughest conditions to see how well this holds up compared to the others. Like, it's kind of what we do.
Were we not supposed to throw those binoculars down the mountain?
No, we weren't supposed to throw the binoculars off a cliff.
That's not
run over them with the truck, scratch them with a rock,
or shoot through them,
or then shoot them with a 28 nozzler at the end. Don't do that.
Not recommended uses, but it was interesting to know what their warranty would cover.
And
anyways,
most of the testing was like legit. It was like, how well do these lenses, how scratch resistant are they? And I found out that with sand from granite, like at that point when you rub it in, you scratch them up.
Yeah.
But we drove over the barrels with the truck. They held up. They were great.
Yep. Didn't lose their pressure.
Throw them off a cliff. They did snap in half, but each side you had two binoculars. They were great.
Yeah, they still held their pressure.
And then when it was all said and done, we were torture testing Vortex's warranty. They say if you return it to them, they'll send you a new one. They did. Awesome. That's a cool torture test.
That was kind of the climax.
And we made it up to them because then we bought a $2,000 scope from them to.
Among other things.
Yeah. And we bought a ton of stuff from Vortex over the years to make up for abusing that warranty.
But what it did for the reputability of
I know, seriously,
far outweighed whatever cost.
The video's done more for their brand than what it cost them to replace a pair of binoculars. They're not even the
watch us like feeling guilty for
$200. They're like $200 binoculars. Yeah. I'm still feeling guilty that like I abused their it was a test for YouTube.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if we do things sometimes in a testing capacity, it may not be that we're demonstrating the proper use of that thing. We'll try to be more clear about that in future videos.
Yeah.
But other times, like a lot of our videos, we are trying to demonstrate things. But if we're like
in a practical
torture testing a product, like I normally wouldn't go try to get the dirtiest water from my pond. I probably would pick running water if I have access, like moving water, so that there's not as much stagnant stuff in it. And I'm like, that's where I would probably choose for a water source.
But how interesting is it to know now that pond right next to your house, even though it has ducks swimming, pooping,
there were tons of like mosquito larvae. You could see them swimming around in the water.
Mm-hmm. Tons of fish. It's a fishing pond.
And if I had to just throw that straight in without filtering it through a cheesecloth first, like it is fine,
which is incredible.
So
we wouldn't have known that without doing such a silly test.
Yeah.
So it's good.
It's what YouTube is for.
Right.
It's more entertaining when it's like the nastiest thing you can think of. Right. I also wouldn't have like pulled water from my hot tub that people have been in and it's full of chlorine and stuff and put that through there to drink either, but I did that in a video. So let's see. Someone in a video said talk less, results more. That's what we need to know. So sorry, we'll
work on that.
Try to talk less and give more results. We need more questions. If you have questions, like chat with us. We'd love to go back and forth. Do you have an opinion as to what the best filters are? So the three we tested, we have the Berkey, we had the Pure Wallet, we have the Alexa Pure. The Alexapure and the Berkey really did just basically the same. The Alexapure was cheaper. The replacement filters are. What I didn't realize before I published that video, and I did reply to somebody mentioned it in the comments, and I appreciate that. The Berkey ones at least state that they can run way more water through them before the filter's used up. So
Awesome.
your dollar per gallon filtered is a lot less with the Berkey. Some people brought up the fact that Berkey was under fire because their testing wasn't verified by whatever entity, and they were making claims that as to the capacity, like how much their filters could filter, that they had never tested it all the way to 20,000 gallons. And I'm an engineer, and I will tell you that, like, when we build a bridge, we don't test that bridge to failure, because then we'd have to build it again. So what do? Like, you do testing on prototypes, right, that are smaller, and we use very scientific means to use and math to be able to scale that to get a reasonable idea. So if the filters are X% clogged after 500 gallons or even 100 gallons, then you could surmise that on average, after X number, a much bigger number of gallons, they'll be 100% full.
Right.
And it may not be a directly linear correlation, but this is what we do. And so I give them a bit of a pass. Like, almost none of these have been tested to the level of what they say or whatever. They also make claims as to what they can filter out, and some of that may not have been directly tested, but based upon the size of the pores, that object that they say they filter out literally can't fit through the holes. There are some things that we can just scientifically know without having to directly test. That said, if they're making claims that turned out to be factually false, like, they should be held responsible for that. Sometimes you get some influencer on the internet who's like, I found out that in their lab testing, this is a huge, huge expose. I found out in their lab testing, they only ran 100 gallons through it. How could they possibly know? It's like, well, you have to know something about science, and then you can actually know. So sorry if I'm being condescending to those people out there who don't know science but like to talk about it. Anyway, that's a little pet peeve of mine. We should be critical, and we should hold people, like, accountable for the truth and stuff. But come on, like, I made that video, and I felt like there were tons of people who just wanted to, like, completely cancel Berkey. And I'm like, Berkey is the reason the rest of these brands even exist.
Right.
And they've been trusted for a long time. They work. People have been using them forever and not dying. So I don't know. I feel pretty good about it. I think I still like Berkey the best, honestly, but mostly because the value per gallon filtered. And I am curious if I don't know if it's 20,000, but it was a ridiculous amount of water they say they can filter.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it was like 5,000, but it was a lot. If that turns out to be the case, or anywhere near that, it's substantially more than anybody else for the cost. Also, you can make your filters last longer by basically, you can take the same process you used to prime it to run water back through it,
reverse,
and kind of clear the pores and stuff. Also, with charcoal-based filtering, the charcoal over time, like, it's kind of pulling in and absorbing toxins. The charcoal tends to attract those to it. Again, another science thing. And the cool thing is like, it wants to go into those filters, but once there's too much into those filters, it won't be able to absorb anymore, and then those toxic things could potentially pass through the pores. But if you take that filter and soak it in water that doesn't have any of those toxins in it, then the toxins want to go from the higher to lower concentration of toxins. So it can actually release that back out. So charcoal filters can often be, you can soak them in just clean water or whatever. And oftentimes, like, first I would run water backwards through it using the priming, and then soak it in water for a couple of days or something like that. And maybe just clean water a few times. You probably get a lot more use out of it again.
Right.
So just something to think about, especially if you have your Berkey filters and you're having to use them for a while, and you're like, well, society has collapsed and Berkey's no longer in business. What am I going to do? Just, clean out your Berkey filter.
Right.
Reuse it.
Certainly better than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question. Got a lot from that video. I want to try to get to some of the other ones. There are a lot of questions people asking. Do they fit in each other? I've not tested the Pro 1 filters yet. I actually am thinking about buying some Pro 1. That's another brand people really like. And just buying the filter and putting it in one of these to test.
Future video.
Okay. Someone asking, because we did those MREs, the strange mouth sensation could have been a mild allergic reaction.
Probably.
So in that video, we ate these 25-year-old MREs that have been in hot and cold, alternating back and forth.
They're in the back of Humvees. They sat in a garage for decades. Not under ideal storage conditions.
No,
but they're supposed to last a long, long time.
Literally, my mouth started going like numb, like when the dentist puts that stuff on your tongue that kind of numbs it a little, or mostly on your gums that numbs them a little, and then they give you the shot. That first numbing solution, that's what it felt like, and I was like, this is weird. I have never come across a food that I'm allergic to, but it, could have been something that wasn't intended to be ingested that was growing in the food. So, but it was the meat that did it. Yeah. Something in that meat that, anyway.
I can only imagine the types of preservatives that are in there to get it to last that long.
For long-term food storage, like MREs, like military style MREs, not my recommendation.
No. I mean, they're good for their period of life.
Sure.
But after that, I mean, they tasted terrible. Yeah. They're really hard to stomach. I probably would have just gone without, even if I was near starving.
Yeah.
Not a good investment.
More people asking if you can put the expensive filters on the cheap ones. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, what do you guys want to hear? There's some of you watching right now. We could just, or I mean, if you're done, we'll just go. Yeah. But I don't know. I just feel like there's got to be something that you want to know about. You could even ask us about us. Like, we told you a little bit in the beginning why we're doing what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to just like talk about ourselves,
right?
Unless there's somebody that's just like, hey, I'm curious about this. Where'd you learn about this or that, and what's your experience with this, or what's your favorite flavor of gum? I don't know. Let's see. Yep, more people talking about Berkey, the NSF. None of them are NSF tested. It's like, yeah, you're right.
We do have a question in the comments.
Oh, we got a question. Let's talk fire, DIY Tinder and fire starters.
You want me to take that? So
yeah,
I
sure.
recently did a video, 5 vital skills that everybody should know before going out in the outdoors. And the first one, of course, is fire. You need to be able to heat yourself up, get through a night, prepare food, things like that.
You can make water safe to drink. You can,
all sorts of things come from mastering fire. And when it comes to building a fire from nothing, you got to get the right materials on hand. And the way I like to think about it is in 3 stages. There's the stuff that will light from just a mere spark off of a flint and steel or a ferro rod. And that stuff can be a little tough to find. It can't be wet at all. Usually needs to be off the ground.
Really dry. Yeah.
Or if it's summer and there's a lot of heat, then sometimes the stuff on the ground is plenty dry for that. But I'm usually looking for something, called it bear moss growing up, but it's lichen.
Yeah.
Lichen. That's something that we find all over the trees here, especially close to rivers. The closer you are to a stream or river, the more of that moss you'll find on a tree. But having a material like that you're able to spark and spread that flame, and then get it to your next resource, which for me is usually pine needles, but something that will take a small flame and spread it out.
Even small twigs, or if you take a twig or even from a log and can just kind of split off stuff from the inside, that's probably a little drier.
Yeah. Or larger shavings, medium-sized shavings.
Right.
Something like that. But there needs to be quite a bit of oxygen between each of these materials. It can't be a dense pile because oxygen is super necessary, especially for that small of a fire.
You're going to get that first little fine stuff. You're going to get it started. And once it's going, you're going to want to kind of gently put like these pine needles onto it, but you don't want to just drop it on there.
I like to drape it on it from above.
Yeah,
it's such a
kind of
small fire.
Hold it above it.
Right, that I'm not burning my fingers as I'm holding this above the fire.
Yep.
Although I need to drop those pine needles pretty quickly because they catch
Once
quickly.
they catch, they're going.
And then it can burn you. So you got to learn to be a little bit careful there. But once you're able to spread that fire between the pine needles, then you got yourself 30 seconds to a minute or two to spread that fire to something more like larger twigs,
right,
or small split wood. And then you got yourself a fire. But until you get to that point, you're on such a time restriction.
Right.
Because
you gotta have all your materials.
And that's why you need to have them all before you strike the ferro rod. You want to be able to get that first thing started. You have maybe 5 seconds to get a pine needle or the next thing started. And then from there, 30 seconds to a minute to get the next thing started. So again, have it all on hand when you start.
Yeah. In terms of like making fire starters, I basically always, when I go camping, will bring fire starters that I make. I think we've shown that, I think, on this channel how I like to make them.
Out of stuff that's already around the house.
Yeah, paper egg carton. We get those all the time, although we don't buy eggs very often anymore because we have chickens. But I hang on to every one we've had. So we have a lot of egg cartons lying around. The paper ones, and then you stuff dryer lint in each one, and you pour melted wax over the top. And the wax is going to help kind of waterproof it, but the wax is pretty critical because that wax will cause it to burn for several minutes.
At a great rate. It's a fairly slow rate. It's not a quick spread of fire, but like, the wick in a candle, it just keeps burning for a long, long time and keeps bringing in melted material.
Yeah. And, in terms of a material that's easy to start, that dryer lint I was talking about,
fantastic.
Like it's actually pretty tough to, like, if you took a piece of newspaper and crumpled it up and tried to strike that with a ferro rod,
doesn't work.
It's actually pretty tough. But dryer lint, I mean,
again, I think it's the oxygen, the separation of the material, as well as just how flammable it is.
Yeah.
But that's something that's free.
Yeah.
It's something that's abundant, especially if you just got new towels. If we wash some towels.
Towels are the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just end up with a completely full tray after.
You get a higher percentage of cotton, not as much synthetic fibers, so it burns better. But you also just get a lot of it.
Yes. But also, if you have animals, dogs, that's something that we dealt with in our house. The last batch that I made, my dryer holds a lot of dog hair. So unfortunately, now when I start fires with this batch of fire starters, it smells like burnt hair. It still works just fine.
Yep.
But that's not the smell I'm looking for. But on the other end, if you use the wax from one of your favorite candles, now your fire starts to smell like cinnamon or whatever.
I just use the wax from like the wax melts that we use in our house to make the house smell nice, I guess. After a while, they're just the smell's not as strong.
Right.
And so,
or you get to the bottom where the wick hardly
on a candle, like the wick, but there's some wax left. You just melt that and pour that over. So again, we just when we're done with some wax melts, we'll pour it back into the tray that they came in and let them harden. And then my wife sets them aside.
Nice.
And I just, whenever I'm going to make a bunch, I just make a bunch. And we do the same thing with dryer lint. Not every time, but especially like when it's a new towels load or something, I'll just get a whole handful of it, stuff it in a Ziploc bag, set it aside again with the wax and the egg cartons, and then every so often I'll just make a batch of them. We buy the 18 egg cartons, so I make 18 fire starters. And the cool thing is like the little, because you cut them apart, and the little top parts, like the wax doesn't usually fill up quite to the top, so you can more easily start the paper in the kind of the four corners. And again, once that's started, it's easy.
Very easy. Yeah, that starts and lasts for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Gets you to that third stage of material that I was talking about where you can put larger sticks on.
Yep.
Get those started, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, totally. So lots of ways to do it.
Fire in a nutshell.
Yeah. Fire is easy once you understand the principles of it and get the practice. Like, I usually, almost always, if I'm starting a fire, we'll start with the ferro rod. It makes me feel good, I guess. I don't know. But also the practice is the main reason. And, I take my son camping and we try with ferro rod for a while. He'll go at it. And then if he's really struggling, like I'll at least make sure that he's gotten it to spark and stuff. If he then doesn't quite successfully turn it into real fire, it's like, okay, cool. But you got that first part down. No, I'll just
Well, and how much of a difference is there between knowing how to do something as having seen somebody do it, they told you the steps, and then having done it enough times that you know what you're looking for, the easy way through it. It's a huge chasm between one and the other. Knowing the principles of starting a fire, being able to strike steel on a flint rod, that's not enough knowledge to be able to go out into the outdoors and in a less than ideal condition, be able to start yourself a fire that you might need for survival, at least for comfort.
Yep. I remember I think it was the very first season of Alone. People had ferro rods and couldn't start fires because they were not expecting. They were at Vancouver Island. It's rainforest. It's a rainforest.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is wet. Even
Yeah.
the stuff that feels dry is still wet.
Mhm.
And so it was a struggle. And so I think by the next season, because they went back to the same place, people were like, okay, I need to have something prepared. And so they had studied up and learned and prepared for that situation and came up with some good options. And they were using like mixtures of sap, and then like you take the tree bark and you take that off, and then you kind of get the hairs underneath it,
Mhm.
and then they kind of mix them together. And so that's kind of like my dryer lint plus
That's your base one
plus
material.
wax.
But you usually have
tree
to
sap.
sit on that stuff and let it dry for a while.
Exactly.
Because when you peel it off the tree, it's
Still
probably a
kinda wet.
living tree. If it's a
Yep.
dead tree, it's not going to come off in those types of threads.
No.
So then
So
you
you
got to
have
figure
to-
out a process to dry
Exactly.
wood in a rainforest.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah,
Once
good
you have a
luck.
fire, not too hard, because that smoke will dry it out really fast.
Yeah, but you're not going to have a fire before
But
your
you-
fire.
Yeah, they literally had people who like could not start a fire for a long time and spent hours and hours working on it.
Man, that was the toughest location. I think I'd rather compete in the
Arctic.
than in that rainforest because you're just struggling against the elements from day one.
Yeah.
Where in the Arctic they at least drop you off in the fall, where it's not freezing temperatures during the day to start.
Yeah, you get a little.
It's not
bit.
completely wet the whole time you're there. So, anyways,
Yeah. Yep.
stay out of the rainforest.
Shelby says that your wife might hurt you if her nightstand candles start disappearing.
That is why I bought bags of wax. It actually comes in this kind of like granule format.
Yeah, I've got
which
some too.
was actually pretty easy for making those fire starters because instead of melting the wax into something that I can pour into the egg containers, I just put the granules on top of the lint
and then melted it.
and then
Nice.
just threw it in the oven. But I
Bake
found
on
out
350 for
for 10 minutes, maybe it's probably all you need. But I found out that mice actually eat wax.
Oh, really?
I put them in my garage, someplace that I don't really see them. And then when I came back to grab the bag months later, there was a hole in the back and all these granules of wax that had fallen from the shelf down onto the floor. And the bag was like half empty. So I didn't know there was
Mice are
caloric value in wax.
There
but,
is. It's like eating crayons,
maybe
which I
there's
guess
like
children
trans-
do. So, I mean, I guess.
Yeah,
How do they even find it? It's not like wax has a strong smell.
it was unscented.
Yeah.
Just base wax. But
Yeah, I've got
For
some
some
soy
reason-
wax that I bought, same purpose, and it's like to make candles. I find that like those candles that you get mostly for like vigils and religious stuff, they make for great emergency lighting candles as
They
well.
do.
But I'm
Nice
like,
and tall.
they're kind of pricey for like what they are,
You
right?
just got to go to the right place. Go to like a second
That's
hand store.
So I was just like, I just got a silicone mold and bought a bunch of wax and wicks, and I'm good. They're super easy to make, so maybe we'll do that sometime here.
The power goes out and it looks like a Catholic vigil.
I know, it's gonna be awesome. No, my sister-in-law at her house, they bought these sconces. You can buy them. They bought them like at Hobby Lobby. You can buy them on Amazon, all sorts of different ones. But it's a light sconce, literally just even with like the glass and everything. But it's just got a spot for a big candle, and so it looks really nice in the house and stuff. But then it's like power goes out. It's like, all right, cool, light them up. And in the dark, like it puts out reasonable light. Put two in a big living room, and you're good to go. So.
That's what I get by with at the cabin because we have solar,
Yeah.
but I always want the batteries to make it through the night, especially if I
Right.
want to watch some Netflix going to bed because we got internet. Anyways, I'll just light those sconces on the walls. We got 5 or 6 different candles spread around the cabin, and
Yep.
they're in locations that I can see corners, so I won't jam my toes, and
Yeah.
makes for a really cool ambiance, especially when you're on top of the mountain.
So, hey, Mr. Cody says, which other YouTube channel would be the ultimate dream collaboration? for Pantry Preparedness.
For Pantry Preparedness. Huh. I love Hacksman's
Yeah, it's cool.
Projects. He
Yep.
has some pretty cool projects.
There you go. Hacksman.
We're coming for you, man.
There's some.
He'd be pretty cool.
There's some fantastic channels out there that teach some really good stuff and that are really entertaining.
There's that guy in northern Idaho.
I just don't remember the channel name.
Oh, sheesh. I'm sorry. I want to give you a shout out. Man, but he's doing all sorts of cool stuff. He has a little mountain stream that he was able to make into a water source, and he built this big pump house. Everybody in the comments was telling him that it wasn't going to work because he did dry pour concrete for the base of this pump house.
Yeah.
Had a nice drain in the middle and everything. And he proved all the haters wrong. It works just fine.
There you go.
Man, what is that channel's name? It's so cool.
It's amazing to me, and this is maybe just a point maybe we end on, but there are a lot of ways to do pretty much everything, right? Sometimes there are ways that are the right way at any given time, and that's usually decided.
Modern rural civilian. That guy's awesome. He's building a diesel truck. It's a modern frame, a modern engine, all that on top of an old body.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to have the coolest looking 70-something Ford out there. Anyways.
But it's like, there's a million ways to do pretty much anything, right? And a lot of them will work. A lot of times we think there's a right way because it's the way we were taught, or maybe it's because
it's the way that's worked for us.
Right. There are builders out there who will tell you the right way to do a specific job is this way, and it's usually based upon whatever their city ordinance building code is at that time, because that's what the law requires them to do. But it doesn't mean it's the only way that works, or even the best way for that matter. So one thing that I would love, and this is something I think we'll take on for ourselves as well, because we are learners, we're students of life. But something I think all of us would really benefit from is like learning from the experience of others. The internet allows us to share this information. I mean, I spent summers in college working for a plumber, and I learned a ton of stuff, not just about plumbing, because I won't say who he is so that he won't get in trouble, but like we sometimes did the electrical work that was tied to the project, even though that wasn't something he was licensed for. But he knew it all, right? He knew how to do it. He worked with electricians all the time. I did drywall for him. I did all sorts of stuff, and I learned a ton of cool skills, but like he had his way to do everything.
And you did it his way because he was the boss.
It worked really well that way. You know what? I have found 100 ways to do things for myself that work that way. And then sometimes I learn a way that's better, and I can learn from that. Like I can do better. If somebody told me that they use toilet paper rolls instead of egg cartons for their fire starters. So you know what I did? I went home and I tried it. I'm not quite sure how they use the toilet paper rolls. The way I was thinking didn't work, but I'll try it another way. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it will work. And it'll work better than egg cartons. For now, I'm like, okay, no, I'm still an egg carton guy, but I tried it and I think that's good. So if we can maintain that attitude of like, let's try, let's learn from each other.
Absolutely.
And be willing to consider the possibility that we don't know everything. I think we're all going to just do way better and do a better job of being self-reliant, but self-reliant in a community. That's the thing is like, whether it's, Grandpa, who that poem was read at his funeral, who was not only a literal bridge builder, but also that person who made sure not just us as his family, but also just the other people in his life. He served everyone around him his whole life, right? He made sure everybody made it across. Or if it's like great grandpa Frederick Kessler, who literally built the ferry and brought hundreds of people across, and then went and instead of just going straight to where he wanted to go, he went and built mills so that
there'd be resources along the way for those that ran dry.
Those people were incredibly self-reliant, but then they also looked out for their neighbor. And I think that if we can be that kind of community, that doesn't mean that we are we're willing to enable all the people in our lives to just stick their head in the sand or whatever, but we can help each other and grow a community of people that want to be self-reliant, but also are willing to help those others who also have that desire to be able to learn and develop those skills.
It's incredibly unselfish to be self-reliant, be able to offer your skills, abilities to others.
Exactly. Very well said.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for today. Thanks for joining us. And we'll see you all soon.
We'll see you next time.